All right, welcome to the next episode of the next installment of the DSend Pod. Today, I'm going to do a couple things a little bit different from previous episodes, and I guess first things first is we got ourselves a new little puppy. So this, this is Timber. Timber's a little Catahoula mix, and he gets to be part of today's talk a little bit. So I'll kind of leave him here if he wants to stay, if everybody gets a little bored of me talking, but he'll be here for the rest of the talk today. I wanted to experiment a little bit with this installment of this podcast and possibly, honestly, interviewing anyone that has something to say or things that they want to bring up and have a conversation about that can be posted online just to discuss their concerns with the world today or even personal ones or whatever else is going on. But honestly, if anybody is interested in taking part in this project, feel free to send me a note, make a comment, send me a message. You guys have my information on this podcast here, so feel free to get in touch with me. Honestly, reach out, send me a video, or send me a comment. Like I said, that's pretty easy, and we'll see if maybe we can start setting up some interviews and just kind of use this as a platform to talk about concerns that some people or anybody, honestly, you're just kind of your average everyday person just kind of has about what's going on right now. So I guess with that, I just wanted to bring up some of the big concerns that I have right now that honestly are kind of giving me some anxiety with how the world is today. And we'll kind of go through those real quick. I'm not going to elaborate a lot, but I think these are some things that are certainly worth kind of bringing up and discussing. And if there's any experts out there that want to honestly have a conversation about this or share more on these things, again, feel free to get in touch with me, leave a note, leave a comment. I'm happy to kind of have these discussions and see where this takes us. If this kind of is a nice outlet for a lot of people to maybe express some of their concerns, express some of their worries and stresses and things like that, and we can just kind of have a everyday conversation about these things. So first one that I want to bring up is I've mentioned it briefly in one of the other episodes, is the wealth inequality that we're dealing with right now in America. I think this is kind of something that's getting out of control. It was already a problem for a little while. And I think, especially with this administration in particular, who seems to be fostering and harboring it, this wealth inequality is really just kind of getting out of control, in my opinion. I was reading a stat the other day that 50% of the current economic spending, as in the numbers that this administration honestly likes to refer to, saying that the economy is not in any sort of decline, but 50% of our current economic spending is spent by the wealthiest 10% in this country. 10% of our population is spending 50% of the amount of money that's spent, or they're driving the economy by half. That means the other 90% of us are really not doing much. We're not contributing to the economy. It's that top 10% that seem to have the most amount of spending right now, and that's because they have the most amount of disposable income because they just keep making more while everybody else is struggling. Moreover, honestly, I heard on Prof G Markets podcast recently that the top 3.3% of our wealthiest citizens, so the top 3.3% in America, now accounts for 25% of the total spending in this country. 3.3% of Americans are spending or account for a quarter of our spending. That is absurd and inappropriate to me, and I just honestly don't really quite understand how we've gotten to that point. So we got 50% of the spending coming from the top 10%, and more on that, 3.3% are account for 25% of our total spending. So 3.3% of that 10%, even, or the 3.3, the top 3.3% in that 10% is a quarter of our total economic spending. That's just absurd, honestly, and unnecessary. And that's really kind of hallmarking the perpetual loss of the middle class that we're getting lately and in the last probably 10 or 15 years at least, if not maybe a little bit more. I get that the middle class was a little bit of an anomaly since the end of World War II in America, in that it's been so strong and so persistent and prevalent, and has become really the backbone of this country. And to some degree, that's a bit of not the historical norm, but like I said, they are the backbone of this country. America was really, at least modern America, was built on the middle class, on the backs of the middle class people. Those are the people that they go to work day to day, they pay their taxes all the time, and really honestly, I think they're probably doing a disproportional amount of work for the country in terms of building it and creating jobs and companies and things like that. They also pay probably a disproportionate amount of taxes because the rich can get. Sorry, there's a fly here that seems to be doing some interesting things. But they seem to be paying a disproportional amount of taxes because the rich honestly can pay to get out of taxes. They're not taxed on just their earnings, so they can own $450 billion worth of things, but they're not taxed on any of that because it's not income, because they haven't actually taken those holdings or whatever, or monetized them necessarily. And really honestly, our like I said, our middle class is really kind of like they're the furnace of the country. They're what keeps this country going. And without them, honestly, without the middle class, we're reverting back to basically feudal systems and times when we had the haves and have-nots. And if that's really what everybody wants to go back to, then that's kind of where we're headed. But I think if we don't have some pretty dramatic step-ins, and that would be by the government, who's supposed to be thinking about things like this, we are going to have a progressive loss of the middle class, and eventually it will just be the poor and the rich. Basically the kings and the fiefs, and the servants or serfs, I guess is the better word. And that didn't really work in historical times, and I don't think that's what we really want to go back to, but that is truly where it seems that we're headed. I think we as Americans need to stop letting the top 10% control the other 90%. They can really only control us if we let them. And I think we all honestly need to start taking a stand against that 10% controlling everybody else. Whether they're doing it maliciously, publicly, privately, whatever, it doesn't really matter. I think everybody here in America believes that they have the autonomy to be able to control their own destiny, their own outcome. And right now, we are not having that. Right now, we have a system where the haves are controlling what the have-nots continue to get or not get. And again, I don't think that's the American way. I don't think that's right. And then we're seeing this wealth inequality show up honestly everywhere. It's showing up in health. Our poor parts of cities and things like that tend to be a disproportionate amount of the people that end up need to go to the hospital, and with chronic diseases and things like that. So the healthier people are also the richer people, or I should say it the other way around, that the richer people are also healthier people. They just have access to more things that can keep them healthy. They also have better access to healthcare. And that's a huge, huge problem right now in our country. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as my next point. I think the inequality also shows up in the autocracy that we're seeing more and more of lately. And then, again, these are things I'm going to talk about a little bit more, but with that inequality, we're seeing more and more consolidation, not just in terms of money, but also other things that can control the rest of the population. So I'll get into some of that stuff here in just a sec, but I do want to talk a little bit more about healthcare. But again, initially, I think my biggest concern is this wealth inequality that's just kind of getting worse and worse, it seems, here in the States. So our healthcare system in the U.S. honestly was novel, it was unique, it was for a long time the best healthcare system in the world, because that's kind of what capitalism does. It allows for the best and the ones that are going to do the most, make the most change. It fosters that kind of environment. But then with capitalism also comes greed. And so these healthcare companies, honestly, as they make more and more, they also want to control more and more, and they want to have more and more money. Um, and that's why we're spending something like 4 to 5 times more on average per American citizen than other well-developed nations throughout the world. The American, yeah, we have our freedoms and that's great, and you are more than welcome to eat trash food if you want to and go wherever it is that you want to go and do those things that maybe make you unhealthy, and that is absolutely in America your right to do that, and I fully support all those things. I also think it's your right to have basic access to normal health care, to appropriate health care that can actually treat your conditions. So you should be able to go out and do the things you want to do. You should also have access to healthcare that will take care of you through those processes. And we as Americans don't really have that much anymore. It's really, again, only the people that have access to this, that have the money to be able to do this, that are able to seek reasonable healthcare, and everybody else is left to mediocre healthcare at best, and that is not representative of the U.S. having the best healthcare system as it used to have. Or these people don't have a healthcare system that they can use, and they end up in the ER far more often than they need to, or they're using the ER as their primary care facilities. And that's honestly a huge stress on the healthcare system. It's a huge stress on the ER doctors and nursing staff and hospitals and things like that. And honestly, since I come from a medical background, I can personally tell you that is not an efficient nor a productive or appropriate way to manage our health care. You don't want an ER doctor doing your primary care, your management of your chronic diseases and things like that. That's not what they're good at. You want somebody who is appropriate for those things to be managing it, and you should have access to those people that can manage that with and for you. I'll just briefly mention, honestly, with our healthcare stuff, that the Medicaid cuts that just came out in this bill that was passed by Congress recently are really going to be, we're not going to see them right away, and I think that's a lot of the some of the problems, honestly, with the attention span of our average citizens. We're not going to see those detriments from the Medicaid cuts right away. It's going to take 5, 10 years to do it, and then it's going to be terrible. And I know this administration isn't going to have to worry about that, but I hope they get the blame for it, because it's going to be on them when this happens. And the fact that we already have a healthcare system that is disproportionately not serving the underprivileged, that we're cutting the access that underprivileged had to Medicaid, I think is just another representation of the autocracy that's happening and the oligarchy that's developing and being, again, fostered and harbored in this country. I think there are solutions to this, and we can certainly discuss that if anybody has any opinions, or we can discuss it in later episodes. But, um, you know, I think a lot of it comes from Congress and members of our political system being allowed to take huge paychecks and um, uh, donations, I guess, is what they're technically being called, or election contributions from these healthcare providers, and they, oftentimes will provide a good amount of money to these politicians or to these public servants because they want things to stay the same. They don't want anybody that's going to rock the boat or, um, make it more difficult for them, for us to reach that access to healthcare. They still want to keep the control, they want to keep the power, they want to keep the money. And I think that's something that we need to change, very seriously change. And honestly, I would propose that maybe Congress or public officials are not allowed to take large paychecks or paychecks at all from some of these healthcare systems. I think that would end a lot of the favoritism that seems to happen with these programs. So, again, I think there are solutions to that, but absolutely, our healthcare system is probably, one of the top of my list of concerns that I have right now for America and the direction that we're going. Um, and the last one, honestly, I'm going to mention is I'm worried about consolidation in a broader sense. I'll start fairly small and just talk about some media consolidation that's gone on recently with the Ellison family. So we have Ellison Sr., who owns Oracle and started that, and he is a visionary and a fantastic man. He's 81 years old right now, I think, um, but did some really phenomenal things with Oracle, and that's kind of the supply side. And they're now doing a lot of the cloud storage and things like that a lot of our AI companies are now starting to use. So he and they as a family have become incredibly powerful. They as a company, Oracle, have become incredibly powerful as well. And with that power, now his son David bought out Paramount Skydance lately, and I guess there's some rumors now looking at or talking about how Paramount might be buying out Warner Discovery. Um, and there's also the rumors that Oracle will be one of the major owners of TikTok when that gets sold, even though it's past its deadline date of 200 and whatever days that Congress had set and placed into law after the president signed it, and our current president is electing not to enforce said law. So just one family is going to own Oracle. That's the cloud storage stuff that's becoming huge and supplying a lot of our AI. They also have a lot of the infrastructure there. So they're going to own that. They own Paramount, which is then going to buy Warner Brothers Discovery to buy, a lot of our media. And they're going to own a huge stake in TikTok, which is our, huge social media thing. So, I think to have all of that in the hands of one family is truly, that is by definition an oligarchy, right? They're on their way to consolidating. Let's see. So we have Paramount Pictures. Paramount Skydance then owns everything that Paramount had owned before. So they own Nickelodeon, they own CBS, the news outlet, they own MTV, Comedy Central, Showtime, Pluto TV, BET, and CW. So they already own all of those things. So they have access to movie, television, and news with all of that, as well as some music stuff. And then if they buy Warner Brothers Discovery, they'll own Warner Brothers Motion Picture, HBO, DC Studios, Discovery, HGTV, Food Network, as well as the other streaming platforms like HBO Max, and news outlets like CNN. So again, you're going to have one family in control of movies, television, news, music, supply, storage, and then streaming things, as well as TikTok, which is our social media kind of whatever. Again, to me, that is really scary, and I don't know, just seems like a dumb idea to have all of that power in the hands of just one family. It sounds a lot to me, like I was saying earlier, like an oligarchical society. And honestly, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. But you know who else does that is Russia. I don't think that's who we want to be. They haven't done well. We're currently kind of fighting with them. The rest of the world doesn't trust them for the most part, even though they're trying to build up alliances, which is another concern. But we as the U.S., we are not Russia. We don't want to do things that way. They've built their system based on oligarchy, and that if you're friends with Putin, then you got control of the nickel or gold or whatever supply, and you got to build your family and wealth on that. And that's not the America that I want to live in. We're also seeing some consolidation in the stock market. By some, I mean a lot. So just as an example, I won't go into this a lot, but the NASDAQ obviously continues to climb. We're reaching new heights. Again, this administration is saying the stock market is doing great. But of the 100 companies that compose that stock index, the NASDAQ, the top seven out of 100 make up 50% of that index. Now, if that doesn't sound a lot like the initial stats that I was telling you with the wealth inequality, then I'm not sure what you're listening to, but I think that's absurd in a number of ways. Not only is it just ridiculous that we have that much consolidation into those 7 companies, but those 7 companies are also making that much more than the other 93 in one of the top indexes in the world. That seems absurd to me. And then it's scary from a place of diversification, right? Like I've always learned, I'm sure most people have always heard, the way you hedge your risk with anything, whether it be stock market or your job or honestly, pretty much anything else, is you diversify. right? If you have your hand in a number of different things, then if any one of those things goes out, you still have plenty of others that you can fall back on and you're safe. That's how you hedge your risk, not just in the stock market, but in everything. So in this situation, if you are invested in the NASDAQ, which most of us are, pretty much all of our 401ks or any other retirement accounts have some sort of NASDAQ in the portfolio or some degree of that in their portfolio. And people think that they're diversified because they're investing in the top 100 tech companies in America. And they're not, because really they're only investing in the top 7. And so if any one of those go out, let's say AI is not going to be quite as powerful as we thought it was going to be, or it's not going to save the trillions of dollars for businesses as we thought throughout the country. Let's say that doesn't go through and that's not the next big thing. If these companies who are now hedging themselves on this AI or building themselves on this AI, if any one of them, if any one of those 7 goes down, the NASDAQ tanks. And I'll just say honestly, right now it's NVIDIA is 9.17%, Microsoft is 8.8%, Apple is 7.29%, Amazon is 5.5%, Broadcom is 5.1%, Meta is 3.8%, and Netflix is 3.33%. So if any one of those 7 companies goes out, the NASDAQ tanks, anybody who's invested in it tanks, that's your retirement down the drain. And yeah, that's being a little bit dramatic and maybe even a little hyperbolic, but it's not too much of a stretch that if we lose too much from any one of those companies, or if more of them, one of them goes or has a major issue, that is a huge hit to anybody that's invested in it, because we're not diversified. Because again, those 7 companies make up 50% of that index. And that's, again, just scary to me. Last piece I think that's been consolidated lately is I think everybody's looking to consolidate power now. And by everybody, I mean our rulers, our elected officials are looking to consolidate power. I'm not going to talk a lot more about this because, I think it honestly kind of speaks for itself. But we have this wannabe authoritarian in power right now that we elected. I'm just going to let that sit for a second. We elected that guy. And now we have Congress just passing a measure to give Trump complete control over the tariffs, which is absurd to me considering that Article 1 in the Constitution, literally first article in the Constitution, gives the power of taxes to Congress, meaning the House of Representatives and the Senate. And they get to make laws, they get to levy taxes, and it's the Congress, it's the House of Representatives in particular that get to levy those taxes. And they literally just voted to give up that power. They want to give up that power to the wannabe authoritarian who's our chief executive right now. They literally just passed that measure to give up said power to a single person. If that's not consolidation of power, then I don't know what is. And it scares me, and it makes me really uncomfortable to live in this country the way that we are going right now. I think we are better than this. I think we as Americans are better than this, and we deserve better than this. And the good news, if I'm trying to look on the bright side of things, which isn't really my norm, but the good news is Trump honestly isn't going to be around much longer because he's old. He's just too freaking old, and he shouldn't have been elected anyway, and that's a separate story. We'll get into that one day maybe. But I'm happy that he's not going to be around for that much longer, just because he's old enough that he probably just doesn't have that much time left here on Earth. And I think that's going to be better for pretty much everything here. I'm hopeful that the loudest speaking minority, which is really what they are right now, this is the minority that's in power at the moment. They're just speaking and screaming the loudest. I hope that they are finally drowned out by the real majority in this country, and that the middle class people start to get a backbone and speak up and elect officials that will actually represent them and represent what's best for this country. And we can move on from this honestly rather unfortunate, embarrassing, and dark time in our history. Last piece I want to say is that the world is not a zero-sum place, unlike our current administration wants us to think. We are in our communities, and then bigger in our cities, states, countries, and yes, even the world. We do better together. It allows more growth. It allows cooperation, further advances, and honestly fosters respect. And that's the world I want to live in. That's the world that I think we can we can find, honestly. And all we have to do is stand up for what we think is right, and start drowning out the loudest speaking minority that's speaking for us right now. The majority finally needs to take power, and that's when we're going to start to see some change. So, again, if you guys get anything from this talk, feel free to leave me a comment, leave a note, like, subscribe, whatever it's going to be. And then if you want to talk on this podcast, send me a note as well. I'm happy to kind of have conversations with people. I love meeting new people, and talking about what your concerns are. And I really want that. I think to be what this is about, what this podcast is about, is reaching out to people and seeing if we can discuss our concerns in a controlled, healthy manner, so that everybody can kind of feel like they have some input. But truly, if you want to be a part of this, get in touch with me, leave a comment, leave a note, and like or subscribe. And with that, hopefully we will talk soon.